Aleksandar Rakic has the potential to do one of the funniest things of the year if he can pull out the win over Magomed Ankalaev at UFC 308.
This is one of the fights that I'm looking forward to the most because there is an unknown. When someone is this heavily favorited and counted out, Rakic is just being completely overlooked for some reason, even though he's a very skilled fighter who looked good in his last fight against Jiri Prochazka. He has the potential to go out there and put on a performance that really impresses people.
This fight really makes me think of Gamrot versus Hooker. The odds were very similar. You had a guy like Gamrot, and I'm going to compare him to Ankalaev. They're both very good on the ground, but can also strike. And then you have a guy who's more of a striker, Rakic and Hooker. Hooker went out there and shocked us because most people had money on Gamrot, thinking stylistically it's going to be a nightmare for Hooker. We're looking at it the same way. They're like, Ankalaev is this some demon on the ground, just dominates everyone. Basically Khabib on the ground.
That's what you would think. Hearing people talk about it and hearing people talk about this potential Ankalaev versus Pereira matchup, you would think that he's Khabib versus Conor. Mm-hmm. But it's not like that.
No.
Ankalaev likes to strike, and he is exciting on the feet. He has tons of highlight KOs, and he's not afraid. Similar to what we saw with Gamrot, I really love that analogy. We saw Gamrot try and strike with Dan Hooker, and it went fine. Mm-hmm. It went okay, but ultimately, he wasn't able to execute his game plan, taking him to the ground and controlling him as well as he would have wanted to. And if we see someone like Ankalaev who is willing to strike and doesn't really feel the need to take down someone like Rakic, maybe we see a bit of a controversial or an upset win from Rakic.
We saw Rakic do some great work on the feet against Jiri Prochazka at UFC 300. Rakic won that first round on the feet until he got KO'd by Jiri. So Lucas, are people counting out Rakic?
I think yes. I think the odds are, in my opinion, too big of a discrepancy for what they actually should be. People are already looking to Ankalaev versus Pereira. That's the fight that everyone's talking about and everyone's thinking about. For some reason, there's this narrative, which we'll talk about later, that has come up that Ankalaev is the person who can beat Pereira. And again, we're going to talk about that and see if that's really true. But for this fight specifically, and what is he for this fight?
I think he's about like a minus 300 favorite.
That's huge. Mm-hmm. Like that's bigger than the Gamrot and Hooker fight.
Low 200s, like a minus 220, something like that. And have Rakic be like plus 2, kind of like that. I think that those odds are a lot more realistic for a fight like this. But to come out and have like minus 300, it's like Rakic has a chance to come out and win this fight. Magomed Ankalaev, if we go back and we look at his record, is really not that impressive. He has the win over Johnny Walker, but before that he had the no contest illegal knee against Johnny Walker, which he realistically should have lost that fight. We saw Peter Yan have basically the exact same knee and lose his belt because of that. We have the draw against Jan Blachowicz in that title fight. And then before that, we have a win over Anthony Smith and a win over Thiago Santos. None of these wins really impress me that much to make me think, oh, this guy's going to dominate Rakic, and then he's going to come out here and he's going to destroy Pereira.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's the consistency of his career. He's 19-1. He hasn't really lost any fights decisively in his recent career. If he gets another win over Rakic, he is undeniable for that title shot just because of how many wins he's been stacking up. Realistically, in that light heavyweight division, he's the only guy who deserves it compared to the rest of the top 10.
But how do you have a guy like Ankalaev be number 2 ranked in your division with his best win being Johnny Walker?
Well, I get what you're saying, but in that title fight against Jan Blachowicz, he went to a draw, so he should be ranked very highly.
That's true.
Johnny Walker was on a bit of a rise, and he was considered very dangerous until he's started getting these, KOs by Volkan Oezdemir. He got KO'd by Magomed Ankalaev. So now he's on a bit of a slip. He's had a very up and down career, and at the time, that Johnny Walker win was very good. So I don't know. It's just a bit of a weird record to look at.
I think I would have rather have had Ankalaev go in there and fight Jiri or Hill, someone that Pereira has already fought, so that we could really get a full idea of how Ankalaev could fare against Pereira.
If we look at Rakic's last fights, he had the loss to Jiri Prochazka, which came round 2 TKO, and then he had the Jan Blachowicz loss, which was a freak leg injury, similar to what we saw with Tom Aspinall.
Yeah, so I don't really count that against him.
Yeah, and if we look at the Jan Blachowicz versus Magomed Ankalaev fight, that was also a draw. So they're at like a similar level. The only thing is that we don't know what Yuri Prohaska versus Ankalaev would have looked like. We've seen Prohaska versus Rakic, and we know how that played out, but we haven't seen Ankalaev versus Yuri Prohaska, so we don't know how that would play out. But we've also seen them both fight Thiago Santos. Magomed Ankalaev had a better performance, but they both won.
So I think we really have to talk about, will Ankalaev keep this fight on the feet?
I think he will. I think he's going to keep it on the feet for the most part. If Rakic is looking really good and piecing him up a little bit at range, I could definitely see him shooting a takedown because, let's be real, Rakic isn't the most impressive fighter on the ground.
He is very lackluster. I don't think he even has a submission win in his career, maybe one. So he's not known for his ground game. And I think it's going to be the thing where if Rakic is looking really sharp on the feet, there's no reason for Ankalaev to keep this fight on the feet.
And that's kind of the benefit with these Dagestani fighters. They're so good on the ground that they can keep it standing when they want to and just really dictate where the fight goes.
I don't know if Ankalaev will get it done on the ground. He's not really a Habib or an Islam or a Chimaev trying to get it done on the ground. He's falls in with the boring Dagestani ground fighters.
Well, he's not as boring as
on
that.
the ground.
On the ground. He doesn't get that many submission wins.
Mm-hmm. So if we want this fight to be as entertaining as possible, we want it to be on the feet for as long as possible. But I am really confident in Rakic, and I think he's going to come into this fight looking really sharp because he's going to have an extra chip on his shoulder. Like, everyone is just counting him out. Suddenly, like, people are already looking past this fight, and they're already looking towards Ankalaev versus Pereira. You know, like, they're like, oh, this is just a layup to get him prepared for Pereira.
In this fight, what does Ankalaev have to do, in your mind, for him to wow you and say, okay, he can have a chance at beating Pereira?
It's going to be a combination. If he can absolutely piece up Rakic on the feet in, like, the first round or a big portion of the first round and land like a big knockdown and then go and submit Rakic right after that, I'm going to be like, okay, now I'm a little bit worried. But if this is a boring, drawn-out decision win for Ankalaev in like a 2-1 win, then I'm going to be like, this guy really is just a product of this weak light heavyweight division with an amazing fighter like Poatan at the top.
I don't think there's much that Ankalaev could do. Obviously, he could get a dominant ground submission or even just hold him down for 3 rounds. But even then, I'm not going to be wowed by his performance. I think I would have to see him go up against someone like Yuri Prohaska or Jamal Hill, who we've seen Pereira fight, to get a good gauge of where he is. And even then, we're not ever going to see that because his future should be a title shot right after this.
Unless he loses, my boy Khalil, call him up.
Or Carlos Ulberg.
Ooh.
Or Uzdemir even, whoever wins that fight.
Yeah, the thing is with light heavyweight is that outside of Pereira, I think that the difference between like 1 to like 10 is not very huge.
Yeah,
I kind of group them all together. Like, they're all like, we saw the number 1 ranked guy put on a way worse performance than the number 8 ranked guy against Pereira.
MMA math doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. Where did this narrative of Ankalaev being able to beat Pereira come from?
It came from all of Pereira's opponents not taking him down. It came from in the first Izzy fight. Yeah, in the first Izzy fight, I was trying to think which one it was. He got taken to the ground by Izzy and was dominated by Izzy on the ground. And Izzy has no ground game from what we've seen. So that narrative started, that was 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago now. It was a long time ago. So he's been improving his game. He is a world-class striker. He only has to work on his ground game realistically. He needs to sharpen his tools on the feet, but he doesn't need to reinvent his game. He needs to reinvent his ground game with Glover Teixeira, who is looking like an incredible teacher. Mm-hmm. He looks like a great teacher. He has a very strong corner, even with Plinio Cruz. Those are such strong grapplers, and he's been training every day. He gets back in the gym after every fight.
And then we saw Pereira get that decision win over Jan Blachowicz, something that Rakic nor Ankalaev could do.
That is a good point. I didn't think about that. Again, MMA math doesn't always work, but being able to defend some takedowns against Jan Blachowicz in his first light heavyweight fight where he didn't bulk up the best, He's definitely filled into that position more.
100%.
And he's gotten stronger at takedown defense. He's gotten better at wrist control on the fence. We saw that against Yuri Prohaska. And he's probably gotten better at jiu-jitsu and wrestling.
He has that black belt, but once you get the black belt, it doesn't mean, oh yeah, I'm never going to touch jiu-jitsu again.
Yeah, and realistically, he's probably a blue belt, but well, whatever. It is what it is.
I'm a blue belt, and I would say that Pereira probably has better jiu-jitsu than me.
Well,
if me and him were to go into a jiu-jitsu sparring match, I think I would die.
sparring jiu-jitsu match. Nice. Isn't it called rolling?
I don't remember. It's been like 10 years. It actually has been coming up on 10 years since I did jiu-jitsu. So
Wow. We got to get you back in there. Let's do an IRL episode.
Is Ankalaev overrated?
I think maybe just a little bit. I know people are going to hate on me for that, but I think he is being overrated just a little bit. He has a great resume, and I know he's won 19 fights now. He's on a big winning streak. I just feel like people are saying that he's going to beat Pereira, like without a shadow of a doubt. He's the guy to do it. He can take Pereira to the ground. Pereira's never faced a wrestler. That's not true. He fought Jan Blachowicz. Both of them have. Only one of them won.
Yeah, exactly. So I think you have to look at it. I think Pereira haters are really overrating Ankalaev. And I think that the typical MMA fan, I think that it's fair to have concerns about if Pereira comes out and he faces his first wrestler. That is 100% fair. Sorry, his first wrestler as champion in a title defense in a 5-round fight. 100% fair thing to have. But we are seeing Alex Pereira on one of the most dominant runs of all time. And people just love to discredit Pereira for what he's doing. They say that, oh, he's only a striker, has all these weaknesses on the ground. So honestly, I hope Ankalaev comes out and beats Rakic, and then I hope that Pereira comes out and chins Ankalaev in the first round. How glorious would that be?
Yeah, it really annoys me how MMA fans, when you're seeing this fighter, even if you don't like them, you're seeing a fighter like Pereira or a Diego Lopez or, you know, who else is on a really good run. You see these fighters getting tons of wins, and for some reason, they're still part of the community that just discredits them. Like, can you not just be happy that we're getting great title fights?
Exactly.
We're getting exciting moments with Pereira. He's fighting 3 times a year, which is right now unheard of for champions.
Mm-hmm. Would you rather see Pantoja fight 3 times a year?
Exactly. Be thankful.
Finally, my last question for you, Lucas. What if Rakic shocks the world and gets it done?
Well, I mean, like the odds say, there's not that much of a possibility. Out of 10, his chances of winning are at about probably a 3.5, I would say.
Yeah, I was thinking 3. So definitely can happen. 30% chance is not nothing.
No, and it's not. And in a fight like a light heavyweight division, you know that those punches can just sit you down right away.
Well, and we've seen it with Rakic. One fluke accident. You step back on your leg wrong and you tear your ACL. That could happen to either guy at any moment inside of the UFC.
That's true.
You are putting so much toll on your body, training and then cutting, that your body is so weak when you're in the cage. You take one wrong step, you lose the fight.
I would still lean heavily towards Ankalaev, and that's who I will eventually predict.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely still going to be leaning towards Ankalaev. I think that that's just the safest pick to go with. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't mind seeing Rakic shock the world just because of all this narrative about they're counting him out completely. This fight, people think it basically means nothing. It's basically a cakewalk, a step along the path, a layup for Ankalaev, just kind of warming him up for Pereira per se. So I think it would be hilarious. I think that my reaction would be gold. It would be like 11 o'clock in the morning, but I'd be buzzing.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe it will be a cakewalk for Ankalaev and he'll prove us wrong.
And that's why we watch UFC, because you never truly know the outcome to a fight. Let us know who you have in this fight. Are you team Ankalaev? Are you team Rakic? Who do you want to see win? And we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
See ya.